are very lucky today to have one of Fleet Street's top digital journalists with us, and he's going to be talking to you. He only finished university 3 years ago, but he's already the Times digital development editor. So if you wanted to work in journalism in the future, and hopefully by the fact that you're here now, you do, I'd recommend you listen to our next speaker, Matt Taylor, because he's got a lot of help and guidance that will be able to help you develop your career.
Thank you very much. Well, firstly, thanks for a great turnout. I currently kind of do occasionally mini talks at my old university in East London, and they all swear they're really into journalism there, and I get like 6 or 7 people. So this is huge. This is amazing. To start out, a bit of self-promotion. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, fine. I don't tweet that much, but what I would be really, really, really happy if you did is you went to my pinned tweet, which I've learned how to use recently, and clicked on that link and signed up to this newsletter. I write a newsletter for the kind of senior editors at the Times and Sunday Times every week. It comes out on a Monday morning, and it's all about the digital media industry, the changing kind of disruptive industries that we're seeing around it, and kind of what's going on in those areas. Everyone says it's really great. It's not just me, I think. So yeah, if anything I say sounds at all interesting, more of it every Monday in your inbox, pre-hangover, ready for you. So this is what I'm going to go through, if I can remember what my slides are. So firstly, a little bit of background on who I am, what I do, and also my team on what they do at the Times. And then I thought I'd go on to something I find a little bit more interesting than just talking about myself, which is kind of the media industry in general, and particularly from my perspective as working at a quite legacy publication, The Times, who are kind of making a digital transition and looking into the future of what we do. The attention economy and how that's changing the way we think about our competitors. This concept, which is very strange, of paying for news media, which the previous speaker wasn't a huge fan of. And this idea I have of news as a product, which may not make much sense now, but I hope will make sense by the end. And I have to answer any questions. There's a big slot at the end for questions. I'm going to sprint through it because I hear people really like asking questions. So about me, this is my life in emoji. So when I went out of A-levels, I wanted to be a doctor, which was the stupidest idea in the world, because you need to do really well to be a doctor. So I was like, fine, except I went and played loads of video games and then got really scared because I hadn't been doing much studying, cried a lot when I got my results, and everyone else went off to university and I stayed at home. When I was at home for that year, because I didn't do any traveling or anything, I just kind of got really obsessed with watching TV, as you would if you spent your entire years previously playing video games. And particularly like TV news and how kind of TV news works. And I stayed up late into the night watching American news broadcasts. American news media is very, very different to British news media. And I got this bright idea that actually I wanted to work in media. I thought this industry is changing. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff happening, so I'll go and do that. So my plan was to get into a course that was kind of doable by me, close enough to a media institution that I could earwig with, and get in touch with them, and then make loads of money at the end by becoming a super whiz. And I think I did relatively well with that plan. So my title's Digital Development Editor. I don't really know what that means, neither do you probably, but basically what I do is I work on this very small team which is embedded in the Times and Sunday Times called the TNL Digital Strategy and Development Team. And we look at kind of the future of news at the Times and the Sunday Times, the future of our product, how we serve our paying audience. We have 180,000 paying digital-only subscribers who are giving us serious amounts of money, so they need to get a great service. So we're kind of thinking, well, what can we do to enhance that? And this is what my team kind of consists of, and it's really interesting because I guess a lot of you guys are interested in journalism, and when I do talks at my old university at least, I get a lot of people coming up to me and talking about how they want to write and how they want to be reporters. And basically, there are those roles, absolutely, but there are tons of other roles that have just happened in the last like 4 or 5 years, and there are more that are happening, and they are more kind of business focused, and they are more around journalism than actually kind of doing journalism, but require those skills of being a journalist to really understand how everything works. And I really hope there are some people in the room that also find that really interesting and are interested in journalism as a business just as much as they are interested in kind of producing journalism and being reporters and writing interviews and all that stuff. So my team we do a couple of things. As a digital editor, I manage a small team of editorial developers, so they're software engineers, and we build tooling for the other journalists in the rest of the organization. This is one of the tools we build. It now produces, it's kind of like a basic CMS, but it produces every email newsletter formatted for every email client. Trust me, that's a really difficult thing to do, dating back to like Outlook 2007. We're also looking at kind of what we can do to make people's lives easier. So this is a proof of concept we made recently, which we're pitching for money for, to produce the Times' kind of front page. So this is the kind of stuff I get involved with. I product manage these tools and kind of work with my team to decide how we build them, and then we build them, and then we test them out, and then we get feedback, and then we build them again. And that whole iterative cycle is really, really fun, really interesting. And the reason I'm kind of like showing these things and making them look really cool, I hope, is like when I was at university, I was a bit of a techie, as you can probably guess. But I wasn't really a programmer, and I've always tried to get into programming, and I've never really succeeded. I'm quite kind of not naturally talented at it. But I have noticed that year on year, every year since I've left, this whole thing is getting easier and easier to do. The amount of tooling and kind of assistance and the ease of coming up with your own thing now is so much kind of easier than it was when I was at university, and it's only getting easier. So what I would like to say is basically like, now is the time. You have more free time now than you could ever imagine, really, to get into learning about these things, trying some stuff out. The other freedom you have is to fail, and fail quickly or fail slowly. It doesn't matter. No one cares. Like if you suddenly decide that you want to do something and you've got a job and a mortgage, that is quite difficult to do. If you're a student and you have a student loan or whatever, or you've got a couple of extra hours a week because you're studying, then it's much, much easier to kind of jump on this. Not to say your lives are very easy. I don't mean that at all. So that's just kind of my intro, and I hope it kind of follows through what I'm talking about for the rest of it. So this is about the decline of print media. And I don't want to be really negative about this, although it is a quite negative subject. Because a decline in print only means there's going to be a rise somewhere else. And it's a really, really exciting area to look at. But the interesting and exciting bit is understanding why it's happening. So this is going to feel a bit more like a lecture. So this is a quote from the McKinsey Global Media Report 2015. The 2016 report isn't out yet. It's due out soon, but I imagine it will come up with the same kind of findings. So the bolded statements are the one you should be interested in. The top one: daily newspapers and magazines have been hurt more than any others by the rise of technology and the internet. The middle one: the content is much more kind of available for free. And the bottom one: readership is falling, advertisers have cut back on costs. And here is a graph of US advertising spending over the last couple of years and predicted into the future couple of years in millions of dollars. And you can see there's kind of a cliff. It is easing out. And this is because they have this theory that basically everyone who's switching has switched, and the decline now is going to be much more gradual because it's just going to be people dying that read news in print, and as they die, they won't buy print anymore, and that will be it. But if you want to see where that money's gone, you can look at this graph. So admittedly, you don't have all of the possible different advertising media on here, but you do have print in the kind of histogram red at the bottom. And then you've got the line, which is total internet revenue in millions of dollars for PC and mobile. So as print advertising revenue has declined, internet has obviously gone way, way up. 90 cents in every dollar in internet advertising goes to Google or Facebook. So we're kind of toying over 10 cents in every dollar here, unless we are working with them. And there's much more of that red stuff to lose. This is from a global trends report, which comes out every year from a consultancy agency, which I can send around. And this shows the margins of the indexing, basically, of the amount of money spent in advertising in blue versus the amount of time spent in each medium in yellow. So print has 16% of the advertising spend, but only 4% of the time spend. Mobile has 25% of the time spend and 12% of the advertising spend. So basically, all of these need to be in equilibrium for advertisers to make sense, and mobile is just going to go up and up and up, and print still has a long way to go down, and TV has a little way to go down as well. It's more about print advertising decline, but this is like this year. This is like, we felt this year. There was a big drop in advertising spend this year. 11% in the UK. The New York Times experienced a 19% drop. The Wall Street Journal is merging sections. They're offering buyouts to people. They have a lot of journalists, so it's going to be very expensive if they lose advertising revenue. It's important because advertising revenue is basically what newspapers are built off of the back of, and it's especially what the internet industry is built off the back of. And it's not unique to print either. We're kind of looking at like traditional media in general is having a bit of a downward slant. Viewership for the first 7 weeks of the NFL this year is down 12%, and the Premier League in the UK is down 20% in the States. So this is not necessarily due to cord cutting, but it may be just due to people watching for free online or doing other things, not engaging with TV, basically. And if you've ever watched an NFL game, you might understand why. Every single time the ball goes down, they have a huge ad break that's like 15 minutes long, basically, and you hate yourself for watching the game in the first place. So now talk about the attention economy. And there's no better kind of example of the problem with the attention economy than the Daily Mail. So this is a graph from Newsworks, which is a kind of advocacy group for advertisers in the print media business across the UK. And the Daily Mail is the most read online newspaper in the UK, followed by The Guardian, then The Telegraph. We're right down there, but everyone's paying for us, so we don't mind being down there because they're giving us loads of money. So from their financial statement this year, this is what they said in their 2015 financial statement, that their advertising revenue is up, and their monthly unique browsers are also up, and they seem to be doing very well. But this is what they said in 2014. There wasn't an interview to kind of run alongside this interview, and because they haven't said that they're making money, I'm going to assume they're still losing money, because wouldn't you scream about making money if you were making money? So the finance chief at the Daily Mail General Trust in 2014 said, "We don't talk about profits of the Mail Online. It is not really that meaningful to think about the individual profitability of Mail Online," which is great. I'll tell you why. If you look at the Mail, they have to produce a lot of content, right, to make sense. They have to, for every article they make, they want there to be another article. They want you to just keep clicking, keep engaging with their stuff. They need you to click more. And because they need you to click more, they need to create more content. And because they need to create more content, they need to create more advertising slots. Now, when you're the Daily Mail and you are like super huge, you're like one of the biggest news websites in the English-speaking world on the internet. When you create more advertising slots, you actually affect your own supply and demand curve. So you end up costing yourselves money because you drive down the cost, the market rate of advertising. So this is like the Daily Mail's rate card for online advertising, which is like dirt cheap in my opinion. But I guarantee no big advertiser will be paying these amounts anyway. They'll be negotiating smaller. If you think about how much, I don't know if you know this, but like how much it would cost to produce like an article on Mail Online if you were being nice about it and not plagiarizing or anything, then it would cost you like quite a severe amount of money. You're paying for like picture licensing fees and bandwidth and the software engineering to make the website in the first place and the journalist to write it and the production journalist to put it on the website and whatever. You know, you're running hundreds and hundreds of pounds per article, and you've got to put up loads and loads and loads and loads of articles. And then considering like you're filling your inventory like with 100% fill rate, you are going to have to get thousands or tens of thousands of views on each article to make it worth it, which makes every article like a punt. which is kind of terrifying. And it's especially terrifying when you look at the rate of ad blocking on the internet, which is only growing. And this is a graph which mainly, I mean, the majority of this is in China, India, Indonesia, kind of Southeast Asia. But it is growing in the UK and the US, which are, Europe and the US are the big advertising markets. And you're seeing this kind of growth, and with every ad blocker, you're getting no revenue. You're getting negative revenue for every view on that content because you're paying to send the images to someone. Bandwidth isn't free. You're paying to produce the content in the first place. So, that is the state of affairs. And it's not really surprising, I think, when you look at this graph that things are increasing when the ad market currently looks like this, which was what the Mail Online looked like yesterday. Spot the article. You should have seen the Daily Express, which basically ran this on their front page, newsprint front page, I think like 2 days ago when everyone got I think Lidl did basically like an advertising buyout. They bought all of the newspapers, all the tabloids in the same go. And the Daily Express had giant front page, Daily Express, article, rest of the page was a giant turkey ad, right? Their front page, right? It's irrelevant. I just thought it was stupid. And this is the Telegraph. Like, it's just frustrating to get to content. This is kind of the end game of ad blockers in that when you are trying to block an ad, you need to work out what an ad is, so you can programmatically kind of determine what is being delivered as an ad and what isn't. So these are very easy because you just look for the thing that's being provided from Waitrose's ad partner and you block all that stuff. And The Guardian and many people are now doing this thing called native content or branded content, and it's basically advertiser, in this case Airbnb, pays to have an area on your website where they have paid for the content to be created. Either they create the content, or in most cases, the organization, The Guardian or whatever, will create the content impartially. But it's always about whatever the advertiser does. And it's a very murky area. There's this kind of the separation of church and state in the case of commercial and editorial departments in newspapers has always been paramount, and this is a kind of blurring of the facts. The Independent now have commercial writers sitting in the newsroom with editorial and actually sharing the same people. So one person might write a news story, they then might write a sponsored ad story. It's insane. And this is why it's happening. Media is like really big business on the internet, and it's only becoming bigger business, and everyone's trying to get a slice of the pie. And we live in a kind of zero-sum economy where previously all the attention was focused on these big media brands, and now your attention is focused on everything on the internet. And these are just some of the giants that are competing with newspapers effectively for your time, because newspapers are no longer just news, they're kind of experience hubs in themselves. And these guys are really, really focusing on the user experience of their products and platforms. And that's something that I think that the news industry is kind of failing at a lot. I'll talk about how we're trying to solve that at the Times in a minute. An interesting kind of side fact, most people who get a phone, they will only install on that phone's lifetime 20 or 30 apps, between 20 and 30 apps. And 80% of their time on their phone will be spent on just 4 of those apps. So if you wonder why Facebook went and bought Instagram and WhatsApp, then you can kind of understand why now. Because between Facebook and Facebook Messenger and Instagram and WhatsApp, that's 4 apps. And that's 80% of your time if you are a big user of those 4 applications. And Facebook want to own your time. They want to own your attention. Just as like a pop quiz, let's identify some of the more obscure ones that I really like talking about. This one here. Anyone know this? Twitch TV. Twitch TV, like no one at my newspaper knew about. It's awesome. It is a game streaming platform that you watch people play video games on, basically. They were bought by Amazon a couple of years ago for $1 billion. Last year, their peak concurrent number of people watching a stream at the same time was over 2 million people. watching the Counter-Strike World Finals and the League of Legends World Finals at the same time. Esports is really big business. Game streaming is really big business. Anyone know this one here? No? This is WeChat, yeah. So WeChat is the Chinese Facebook Messenger or Chinese WhatsApp. It has 650 million monthly active users just in China. And WeChat is like the most fascinating application on the planet. And I haven't been to China yet, and I really want to go to China at some point soon. Everything in China runs off of WeChat. They have a kind of monopoly on everything. You go into a restaurant in China, and there's QR codes for WeChat that you scan. By the way, QR codes are really big in East Asia because typing Chinese characters and stuff is really, really difficult. They never took off in Western markets because the keyboard is much, much more sensible if you ever think of that. And you can do anything on these things. So you can pay your restaurant bill on them. You can book a taxi. You can book a doctor's appointment. You can go to a cinema's WeChat account, choose a movie you want to see, choose the time, pay for it with your WeChat money, and then go there and just show your WeChat QR code and you're in. WeChat have been enormously successful, and it's not especially related to media, but I think this kind of thing is really, really interesting, where one app effectively tries to become your home screen, because the more power you give to those applications, the more kind of in trouble all of the independent people are more reliant on those things. Everyone knows who Netflix are, but Netflix last year produced 600 hours of original programming. This year, they are planning to produce 1,000 hours of original programming. That's stuff like, Marvel's Daredevil and all of the House of Cards, all of that kind of stuff that they've produced independently. Netflix are basically seeing a lot of competition from Amazon. They want to produce their own stuff now. They're also seeing the people that previously provided them very cheap licenses to stream their content suddenly charging them a lot more. So they're like, oh my God, we should just produce our own stuff. And Facebook and Twitter also kind of want to get in on this market of kind of media production, but they're not going to pay for it themselves. Everyone knows instant articles, right? Facebook launched this like last year before maybe? It's been a long time. My life moves very quickly. So instant articles is a system basically that Facebook developed around the time when ad blocking was getting very big, because their concept is basically if you're inside Facebook's application and you want to go through to a piece of content produced by a partner, like the Wall Street Journal or something, you can tap on that piece of content and it will load instantly, hence the instant articles thing. And the reason it loads instantly is because it's already in Facebook's app. You're not going to the Wall Street Journal anymore, you're going to Facebook, and the Wall Street Journal have provided their content to Facebook for free as part of a kind of publishing collaboration thing. So the Wall Street Journal gets the advantage of being able to sell ads inside that platform, and there's no chance you can block ads inside Facebook's app because they'll never let you. And Facebook get the advantage of keeping people inside the app, which is what they always want. You're kind of concerned looking into the future is how much stuff is just going to end up being just Facebook publishers. I mean, you already see these pages now which they only exist on Facebook and they only produce content for Facebook. And Facebook kind of controls everything they do. I don't know if people saw the outrage at the Vietnam War picture and the Norwegian editor, I think, earlier this year. If you don't, those words are enough to look it up in Google. Very interesting. Facebook becoming like the big editor of the world is my point. Twitter Moments. Twitter is an awful product, and Moments is a terrible product. So we'll kind of forget about this, but it is worth thinking about in the grand scheme of things, because this is effectively kind of Twitter's really half-assed attempt at trying to keep their 140 character limit, which makes their platform what it is, and also get in on this. If you're a media partner, you can produce your own moments, you can put all your content inside of our platform. You get the added benefit of our network effect. We get the added benefit of stealing all of your content for free. Apple News, this came out in iOS 9. Apple suddenly wanted a piece of the pie as well. They were like, my God, all this news content is going to Facebook and stuff. Facebook and Google are becoming our competitors. Google launched a thing called AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, at the same kind of time. And Apple is scared of all this stuff, so they started saying, hey, we've got this app which is like Facebook, and you can push all of your content to it, and you can sell ads inside it, and we'll sell ads if you don't more kind of keeping people inside a platform that they control. And by far my favorite, Snapchat. Snapchat Discover has not been extremely successful as far as I'm aware. But I think this media company, Snapchat, shows a huge amount of promise in what they're doing, totally rethinking how people engage with news content alongside content from their friends and stuff in the same way that Facebook is trying to do that. Yeah, like it's been a push for everyone to get on board, but again, I think Snapchat's T's and C's are basically you have to produce content solely for Snapchat's platform. You can't put it anywhere else. The most recent stuff is this stuff like Good Luck America, which was their kind of short series on the elections. They want now publishers to produce short Snapchat shows specifically for Snapchat. So you'll go and you'll produce like a 20-minute show consisting of 10-second snaps that you can just tap through. Surprisingly engaging. I don't know if anyone's tried any of them, but they are really good. So the point I'm kind of getting to is we're coming up to this kind of crevasse emerging between two types of media. There's distributed media, the BuzzFeeds of the world, that are all on board with this, and that's how their entire business model works. And their model is as much based around technology as it is around journalism. It's about being able to push the same piece of content to all of these different platforms and gain from the kind of holistic network of everything. And there are independent media platforms. I don't like to say like the Times, but like the Times, and like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and people that are still doing this, but are very much focused on producing a product at home. The Guardian, I think, is another example, although they come at it from a different angle. Their own product, which is kind of worthwhile in and of itself for you to engage with it. So they're not interested so much in making sure you get kind of the basic version everywhere. They're trying to draw you back to their site. So next we talk about money in media, paying for news. So another bit of kind of ask the audience. Products we pay for, so hands up if you pay for one of these things, at least. If you pay for 2 or more, 3 or more, okay. 2 or more is Netflix and Spotify, right? Or Amazon Prime and Spotify. I'm a huge Amazon Prime fan. Now, my question to you basically is like, you pay for these things, but does anyone here pay for the New York Times, or the Times, or the Wall Street Journal? Again, I was kind of thinking hands might pop up, but I guess no one does, because no hands have popped up, right? So why don't we pay for news? And I'd kind of like to come back to this and maybe ask some questions and hear your feedback on this question, because it's something I'm really interested in, is what is the psychology that has evolved to mean that news is okay not to pay for, but everything else is, and we're very happy passing $4.99 or $9.99 a month across the table for Amazon or Netflix or Spotify, but we're not for news? Because we're all interested in that industry, right? We want to move into that industry. We all want to get paid for it. The money's got to come from somewhere. So in my opinion, these are the reasons we pay for like a digital service. So we pay for like the differentiated content. Amazon Prime has different content to Netflix, so I kind of pay for both if I want both sets of content. We pay for the experience. Like Netflix has a really great like user experience, right? You can play it on any device. You're not just limited to the Amazon Prime Media stick. You can see your recommended movies from your movie history. You can see recommended TV shows. You can rate your old stuff and then get better recommendations back. We pay for the convenience. Like, we think back in my heyday when I was a teenager, and you might accidentally download some music, you know. Now Spotify makes downloading that music actually more difficult than paying for the music, whereas previously you'd have to go out to the store, get the music, go to iTunes, hit download on a whole bunch of songs, pay individually for each track. Think about, do I really want this track enough to pay for it? The kind of subscription, buying things as a service model is emerging as this thing which is much more acceptable to younger minds than the microtransaction paying for each kind of individual thing. We pay because it helps us in our lives, like Netflix. You know, you learn something from a Netflix documentary, you watch a Netflix movie. You might have people round to watch a movie together, like it helps you socially or intellectually or in some other way, helps you calm yourself with Spotify or something. And we pay because we see value in the product, right? Like, in the end, we look at a movie or a TV show or some music, and we're like, wow, that's worth something. People have spent time, like, people have put effort into that, right? People need to be paid for this. We're not going to get this for free. We enjoy supporting people. I think that's a particularly interesting point because that's kind of the thing that has emerged around products like Twitch TV, where there are 15,000 partners on Twitch TV as of last year. And the partners get paid for 50% of the ads that people view while they're watching their streams. But they also get paid when someone donates to them or subscribes to their channel for like $4.99 a month. And what do you get for subscribing to someone on Twitch? Like nothing, right? You get like a couple of emojis, which are like really gregarious and you would never use. But you want to support the person because you've been watching them for like 4 hours and they're hilarious. So that's why you give them like a couple of dollars. You see value in what they're doing. So why don't we see it in news, man? So I think newspapers and like news media in general, we made a really big mistake like in the early noughties, and particularly in the UK, because the BBC exists in the UK, and the BBC is huge. And I think everyone panicked when the BBC went online, and they were like, we need to compete with this organization. There is always going to be a free competitor to what we're doing. And this race to compete, and particularly kind of the virality that the social web enabled, like you can post an article and then 2 more people can post it, and 2 of each more of those people can post it, and you know how virality works. That made advertising very, very effective, and you were thinking, wow, I can get loads and loads and loads of page views on my site, I can sell loads of ads. The market's still quite small, these ads are still in quite high demand. There aren't companies like Google and Facebook that are swallowing so much of the market with really well-targeted advertising they can charge huge amounts of money for. And I think this is like a mistake that we made, because we rushed this, and we adopted a model which wasn't actually what we were ever doing. So we adopted like the model of the newswire, like PA or AP or AFP. I've got P in them somewhere. You know, all these organizations around the world that sell subscriptions to their network of reporters and correspondents and tipsters all over the globe to newspapers and news organizations on a kind of subscription-free basis, and you pay a lot of money for it, and you get the wires, right? And the wires never really operated in a free market. But because the BBC kind of acted like a wire service, we were like, yeah, we need to be wire services as well. And when we made the product free, when like Times Online went up for the first time, it was free. The Guardian is still free. The Mail is free. You know, the Telegraph is free. There's now like a premium option, but they've gone away from like here is a soft paywall to here is no paywall, but now you can pay like £2 a week and get a gold star up against your name or something. I haven't looked into it. And the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, there's a lot of, I mean, if you look at the US media market, for example, many, many, many more of their papers and their news organizations are behind paywalls. You can't watch MSNBC in the States, for example, on a kind of, you can't go to msnbc.com and watch MSNBC without having a cable subscription. I know that's kind of like silly in this kind of day and age. You can't like subscribe to MSNBC directly, but my point is you still can't pay for it. You still have to pay for it. We reduced the value of news down to nil by being like, this is free, we're all competing in a free ad-supported market, we can be like Facebook and Twitter and all those kind of networks, and we can make money off of advertising as well. Wrong, we have to pay for our content, Facebook and Twitter don't have to pay for their content, and that's like the key difference between how like our content works and their content works, and how their advertising has much better margins than any of our advertising. So, news as a product. Anyone watching South Park at the moment? South Park at the moment is the best season of South Park I have seen in like years. I would recommend everyone watches it. A couple of years ago, South Park, I'm going to do a short promo for South Park in the middle of my talk. A couple of years, South Park, they transitioned from doing like Family Guy or Simpsons-esque shows to doing series which followed the news agenda somehow. They basically write each episode week to week. This year's series is following the US elections, so it's hilarious. And there are these little characters called member berries, and they're like grapes, and they say really cool things like, oh, remember when Chewbacca was great? And everyone's like, oh yeah, nostalgic, right? And that's like, they're like responsible for Trump's rise, basically. And they say like, oh, remember when there weren't so many Mexicans? You know? Like, they start to say really racist stuff, and the guys are like, what? What's going on? Remember when digital product was just a website, guys? Like, when I was at university, that was it. You made a website, you might have made an app was a really weird thing to have still. But like, you just made a website, right? You made a WordPress blog or something. A lot of these news websites, they were just kind of like sections you'd click through and you'd go and find your articles and stuff. It's not like that anymore. We don't have a market where you can just put all of your content online and just expect people to go and find it. That's why there's all of these kind of new job roles and really interesting kind of opportunities opening up in news product, because no one's been thinking about it until very recently. And this is kind of the stuff that The Guardian have been doing a lot with the way they cover particular types of content on their homepage, the way they do kind of mobile notifications. I don't know if anybody signed up for their mobile notifications during the US election. That was really depressing. But you got a nice little widget in your phone that showed the two cartoons and the sway back and forth. The New York Times really thought about digital product in the case of the election. They had those kind of live feed swingometers that showed you the chance of stuff happening. Again, I don't want to talk about this bad times. Didn't like staying up that night. But the idea that I'm getting to is that not just putting your news online is no longer the thing you want to do. You want to think about how we deliver that content. I think you're going to be judged on not only just how good your content is, but how your content is delivered to people. I think you're going to be judged on how people feel when they use your site, your product, whatever it is. How enjoyable they find it, you know. That's just how they're judging everyone else, so it's how they're going to be judging us as well. So this is something we've been working on at the Times a bit. And this is a graph of page views throughout the week. And it didn't used to look like this. It kind of looked like little mounds. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a product. Like, we didn't want to just make a new website. We wanted to think about like how people engage with news, how people used to engage with newspapers, how we can kind of bring that feeling back, how we can make people proud that they're subscribers, how we can make them feel good when they read stuff. And our idea was to just go backwards and just ignore all this newswire stuff and just produce every day like 3 newspapers, effectively. Like, make the newspaper digital properly. Produce bundles of content. You could start at the top, you can finish at the end, you can go straight to the sports content, you can read the sports content, you can finish the sports content. You get that feeling when you finish something that you're happy and you've accomplished something. You don't get like this endless sprawl trying to get you to click on new stuff, because that's the only way we make money. We make money when you're happy. So we don't need to worry about trying to get you to click on new stuff if you don't want to click on new stuff. We just want you to have enjoyed your experience enough to keep paying for us. So this chart shows how we wanted to model behavior, basically. So we start in the morning, and we have like a morning edition, and that's this giant like purple spike here. And then we have like a second spike a little bit afterwards. At lunchtime, we do a lunchtime update of what's happened over the course of the day. Our idea is like, you don't need to, if you're a Times subscriber, trust us, you don't need to go anywhere else. You can come to us at 9, at 12, at 5, and you can experience what's happened over the course of the day without having to worry that you've had to keep up all day. Doesn't make a lot of sense, I guess, to news junkies like us, right? But it makes sense to customers. We've done a lot of research. And then you get another kind of spike, towards 5 p.m., and that's when we do our evening edition. And then we're trying to bring the kind of tomorrow's edition forwards earlier as well, so we can kind of get in that just before you go to bed, what's kind of happened, what's going to happen tomorrow morning, get the kind of advance on the Today program when you wake up, that kind of thing. And this is something that, not necessarily this is going to change like how we view news products, but it's this kind of thinking that I think will really help you and enable you to get a job if you're interested in this kind of stuff. This is a framework for product management called Jobs to Be Done. And if you look it up, it's by a guy called Clay Christensen. He's a professor at the Harvard Business School. And he is a kind of world-renowned expert on the theory of disruption, like how markets get disrupted, how industries get disrupted, like Uber taking over the taxi industry, how that happens. And he came up with this theory that it's not about kind of what your product is, it's what your customers use your product for, what kind of mindset they're in when they come to your product, what kind of things happened in their life that caused them to interact with your product, what kind of feeling do they come away with when they finish with your product. All I'm saying with this slide is I think it would be very beneficial for all of you to go and look up product management and particularly this framework, because it's really, really interesting, Jobs to Be Done. Because news media has not been thought about in that way, and it's only just starting to be thought about in that way. So if you want kind of the heads up on the things you can talk about that will sound really, really impressive, these are some of the things you can talk about if you're interested in transforming how news works. In my opinion, like, journalism needs these people who understand business, these people who are interested in the business of journalism, not just in being journalists, just as much as they need journalists themselves to create this future market, this future industry, which we don't quite understand yet. We need people to help transform it, as we need people to continue pushing through and producing good content. And this is like one of those examples that like it's another like interesting thing to think about and talk about at interview or stuff maybe is this kind of concept in psychology on how you price stuff. And this is just a slide that I made, and then there was nowhere really I could put it, so I just stuck it here because I really think I still want to talk about it. So this is how the New York Times price their content, and this is how Slack price their content, which is a chat startup in Silicon Valley. This is how Netflix price their content. Do we notice any similarities? They all have like 3 things, right? They've got good, better, best. And the good, better, best pricing model is like a very famous thing now. And it came out of a kind of psychology business paper where a couple of students tried to sell beer to college students, and they sold 2 types of beer, and one was slightly less expensive, one was slightly more expensive, and they made, you know, X amount of money. And then they added a cheap beer to the mix, and the cheap beer drove down the amount of money they made. A lot more people chose the cheap beer. So then they took the same 2 beers, ignored the cheap beer, and put a more premium beer in there, like much more expensive. And it drove everyone up. And it didn't drive everyone up from like the beer that was previously the cheapest beer. You know, people were still buying that as much, and there were other people who were buying the more expensive beer. People stopped buying the cheaper beer because they were like, I don't want to get the cheap beer anymore. There's this really expensive beer. I look really cheap if I buy the cheap beer. I'm going to get the middle beer. And everyone got, like, basically everyone got the middle beer. And that's what you'll see here. Like, pretty much everyone goes for the middle thing, right? The left thing is only there to trick you into thinking that the middle thing is better than it is. These kind of things are fascinating to me. I have no idea if they're fascinating to anyone else. I'm going to stop now. But that kind of stuff is just going to, like, the New York Times and the Washington Post, I think, are 2 newspapers that currently offer this kind of pricing model because they have seen it elsewhere, they've experimented with it, they've seen it work, they've seen it drive up their margins. Thinking about this kind of stuff and how this stuff works is really, really impressive to people. In conclusion, go and fail. Digital media is like changing massively. It's like tumultuous. Everything's like you're on rocky ground all the time, but it's really, really exciting. No one really understands what we're doing. The market is changing, but the advertising market is kind of changing even faster. Everyone is our competitor. But as I said before, you'll never have as much an opportunity now to go and experiment and fail with these things in mind. Like, if you fail, you've learned something from that failure. If you don't learn something from failure, then that is a total waste of time, and I would guarantee, like, you shouldn't do it. But if you're going to go out and fail, look at yourself afterwards and think, what could I have done better? Like, why did I fail? And you'll learn from that, and you'll be able to tell a story about that. There was a famous mantra at Facebook. It's now changed to something much more boring, but it was move fast and break things. That was Mark Zuckerberg's like mantra. He then changed it to move fast with stable infrastructure, which is just awful. My other like recommendation is like go and learn to code. You don't need to learn that much. I'm not asking you to all become computer whizzes. I'm not. Like my software engineer guys on my team laugh at me whenever I write anything. It's just awful, right? But the amount of, I'll say this, if they ever watch this, it'll be really embarrassing, but the amount of respect it's kind of given me from being able to do that small amount of stuff is really, really good. And it helps you understand how difficult a particular task is, how easy something is. And while you're a student, you can get these two things at the top. They basically give you free money to spend on coding courses and other such stuff. Doesn't matter what university you go to, doesn't matter what course you're on, you can get them. And there are also these websites down the bottom. There are free courses there. They're really good. They will just help you through the basics. They will help you understand stuff. We also have an event, and you should definitely, if you're not going to follow me, and of course you should follow me, but if you're not going to follow me, definitely follow this account. This is Build the News. We run a student event once a year. It's going to be really, really big this year. We're changing everything up. It's going to be like a week-long, intensive journalism, product, and technology workshopping session. All of your fees to come down to London and live in London for a week will be paid for. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, follow that account and hope to see you there. Any questions? Thank you for listening. I'm here for a while. My train isn't until much later because it was cheaper, so I'll be around. Yes?
Can you just explain a little bit more about branded content? When on a website where you say, like the Telegraph might have the Waitrose feature around there, or the Guardian might have the Airbnb. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yep. So branded or native content, that is content that looks like, it's kind of like a psychological trick. This is why I say it's a gray area, because people are trying to effectively trick readers. But publishers are kind of so desperate for money that they will create content for advertisers that looks like editorial content. And they call that branded content or native content, right? Because it's an ad, it's not actually an editorial piece. Although some pieces are kind of editorial pieces with sponsored advertising around the outside. That's more kind of sponsored content. But then this branded content stuff, it's made for the advertiser specifically. Sometimes it's written in part by the advertiser. Sometimes it's written by a journalist. Sometimes it's written by an ad copy person. It's tricky to work out what is what. And that's why I kind of find it quite terrifying, basically, that we're going down that route. Anyone else? Well, I've bored you to death. It doesn't have to be about this, by the way. It can be about anything in journalism. I'm happy to answer if I can. Yes?
What I was going to ask was, I was going to ask how you actually got into the Times. So you said about how you decided to start watching TV news. What was your route in?
So this is like stupid lucky, right? I think anyone who's in journalism has had to have some luck at some point in their lives, right? So my plan was to go to London to university so I could chum up with the people in the media industry, which you don't have the opportunity to do here so much, except for today. Now's the day. Basically, I went to a load of like meetups and events. It's well worth it. I'm sure stuff happens around the country. It's not just in London. I know there are many, many more in London than anywhere else. But there are kind of like media meetups like Hacks and Hackers, and like there's this meetup we go to called Journo Coders, where you get to kind of meet all the techies that work in journalism. The FT run a lot of stuff as well. Again, it's all very London-based. Basically, I went to those meetups, I met a load of people, I talked to them. I talked to them about what I was really interested in, probably like scared them off like I have done for all of you guys doing this. And then started following them on Twitter. And Twitter, as much as I hate it, got me the job because one of the guys like tweeted one day, hey, we're looking for someone to do this. And it turned out I was really good at that. That was InDesign. I'm really good at InDesign. And it was like page layout, basically. And I went in and I started doing some night shifts and I thought it was work experience and they were actually going to pay me. So that was like really, really lucky. I was like the richest kid on campus for like a year. It was hilarious. Could afford to print my student newspaper, basically, because of that. But I don't think that necessarily got me the job. It definitely helped a lot. But when it came to the job, what really helped me more was all of this stuff that I was talking about, and also the fact that I'd made and printed my own student newspaper from scratch. Admittedly, with the money that I'd made, I paid for it all myself. I wasted like $1.5 grand on it. But the number of people that were involved in that student paper, if we all put 50 quid in, we could have done it. You know, I think there's an opportunity for you guys, basically. If you want to do something, you can find enough like-minded people to do it. And it all looks really impressive. If you're dedicated and you put money into it, people are like, wow, you really care about something, right? So yeah, hope that answers. Yes?
What's the success rate of the paywall once people sign up to it and continue to?
So it depends basically on the kind of customer, and there are lots of metrics you can use to determine how much someone is likely to stay with you. A lot of people stay with us for a very long time, and a lot of people cancel within like 90 days, basically. And there's like 2 buckets of people. And the canceling within 90 days is very much more, like a higher percentage. I don't know the exact figures, and I couldn't tell you the figures even if I did know the figures. But basically, it's a low conversion rate, as any kind of payment structure is. And then it's basically a 90-day period where we really try to engage you with the product. If you're not interested in the product by that time, you're probably going to leave us. If you are interested in the product, then you continue on. And that's where like I'm really focusing kind of news products, because it is about trying to work out for each kind of segment of customer, why did they sign up? Like, what job does the Times do for them? What does it help them with in their lives? And how can we really emphasize that in that period of time so they do stay with us? It is successful. Like, there are over 400,000 Times subscribers now that are paying between £4 and £8 a week. So that's a lot of money to work with, and I definitely think paywalls are going to be a big feature in journalism if they aren't already. And they are already, in my opinion. Yes? Yeah. Fake news is really interesting. I talked to my cab driver on the way in, and he was like, oh man, the mainstream media, they just lie all the time. And I was like, yeah, they do. And he was like, oh, all my mates, the people I have in the cab, they talk about watching Russia Today. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great news channel. That doesn't lie at all. And then he was like, man, Ofcom would stop them if they could. And I was like, Ofcom has like 3 active complaints against Russia Today. And then he stopped talking to me. Yeah, like fake news is like the bane of my life. The only things that I think will stop fake news are the powers that be. And this is the problem with the lawless nature of the internet, taking action. Facebook, Twitter, the big networks, the chat apps. There was a Chrome extension I saw today you can install that when you go to a website, it pops up a little thing if it's on the list of potential fake news, and it's like, beware, you're reading fake news. It's very worrying for me. I don't think paywalls are going to stop it, but I do think the kind of stuff that Google and Facebook have announced in the last couple of days, or literally like this morning, I think, will help in trying to shut down their revenue streams, because they're not going to make any money out of paywalls, but they will continue to make money out of advertising until, and how much does it cost to write a fake news story, right? You're just making it up. Yes?
Do you not think in this day and age, having access to the news is almost like a human right, so why should we have to pay for it?
It's an interesting theory, right? I think that is, unfortunately, an opinion of a lot of people, is that news is kind of like a human right, and people should have access to it. To that I say, publicly funded media organizations exist for a reason, and I think the BBC does a very good job in that case, and stuff like PBS in the States and NPR. But the problem is you have to pay for it, right? Journalists aren't going to do their work for free, and you've seen the kind of mess that citizen journalism creates. Jules was here earlier, right, and he talked a bit about the mess of UGC. You need to have that kind of professional, impartial person, and that professional, impartial person needs to eat, and they need to live somewhere. And already we're paying journalists like pittance. So it's kind of a necessity that we're going to have to pay for it somehow. And my only kind of sadness for this is that, advertising was a way to pay for this, and it's becoming less likely as a way to pay for this. And that's the only reason I say that we're going to have to directly contribute, is because we can't so much kind of indirectly contribute by advertising anymore because it's not making enough money to support the kind of organizations that it needs to support. That's my kind of sad conclusion. I wish we could pay less. I wish the Times paywall was less, but that's not my decision. That's like marketing, commercial, business decision. So. Okay. I'm here afterwards if you do want to grab me. So.
Brilliant speaker, thanks so much for coming up. A good day, and let's do it all again tomorrow. So, can we just thank Matt very much?